Well, let me ask about the Building Bridges initiative. We've had a number of questions come in on it from members of the public, and I know that the report is now out, and that this comes from, for those of you who don't know, a historic handshake with your long-term opposition, Raila Odinga. And I'd like to take the opportunity to ask a question that some skeptics have posed to me, which is what the overarching aim will be and what the structure of Kenyan society will look like once you go through this process. And one thing that has been put to me that I think will be very useful for you to comment on is whether if there were to be a referendum or any kind of constitutional change, and I know you've said you're agnostic on exactly what form it takes, but there are some people who are concerned that you might, quote, do a Putin and potentially stay on in a role after you leave the presidency. Can you rule out for us today that in a few years' time, I won't be calling you Mr. President or even Mr. Prime Minister?
Well, I will put it to you this way. Let me just go first and foremost to the base question. And the base question is, what is the outcome that we all hope to see? The primary reason for the Building Bridges initiative, since our multi-party politics, we have always had tensions at every election cycle, tensions that were ethnic based. And when we came together with Raila Odinga, the whole objective was to say that as a country, despite the fact that we have a new constitutional dispensation, we must ensure that future generations, our children, are not necessarily going to be faced with the kind of thing that we have seen. We want to transform our politics and make our politics that much more inclusive. And by inclusivity, we said, let us look at what are the issues, what are the crises that make these things happen. And that was the whole point of the BBI review across the country. Let's go through these points. Let's hear from the Kenyans themselves. Why do you always feel that an election must bring tension? And many things came out, the feeling that if one community won and another was left out, people would feel, they feel like, okay, this is not our government, it's their government. So how do we deal with that? How do we make sure that government is that much more inclusive? How do we deal with, we now have this devolved system, but people sometimes may be feeling that they are not really getting the full impact of that devolution. So how can we empower those in devolved places more? The next issue was, we have cross-border communities. How can we work regionally so that, especially all these communities, be it on the Somali border, the Ugandan border, the Tanzanian border, and others, how do we make them feel that they're not split, they don't have split loyalties, so to say. So these are amongst many numerous issues that came about. And the whole focus of that, and again, very much in tandem, because even the framers of our 2010 constitution also recognized that after 10 years, there may be need to relook at this constitution, because constitutions are not necessarily written in stone. They are written to keep society moving and blending together, may need review. Whereas many chapters are absolutely excellent and Kenyans have seen great benefit, there may be some areas that we may need to review. And that's the reason for the referendum. So it is unfortunate that some have interpreted the scenario of a referendum to change the constitution to mean that certain individuals want to change that constitution to extend the presidential term. I can tell you, if there is one thing that Kenyans are very, very clear about, is the two-term limit. The two-term limit Kenyans are very clear about, and they've been clear about since 1992 when we introduced multipartyism. And there's been no single president that has broken that, and I don't intend to be the first.
Does that mean you rule out the premiership?
I have no clue whether there is going to be a premiership in the constitution. You see, these are the questions that people are now posing. What I told you is, I gave you a very clear synopsis of the areas where people are interested in. They're interested in the value of their vote. They're interested in the distribution of resources. They're interested in inclusivity in government. I have not heard of any of these other issues, and that is why I can't comment about what, as far as I am concerned, are not been a principal issue of the whole building bridges initiative. The purpose is not there. All I can say is that the office that exists today is the office of the President of the Republic of Kenya. Our constitution is very clear that a president serves for 2 terms. 2 terms. I am in now my 2nd term. No president has broken that. I don't intend to do it.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. President. It's a delight to speak to you. I'm going to hand over for one last question to Aubrey Ruby, but I really appreciate everything that we've managed to cover today, and thank you very much from me. Over to Aubrey.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
When are you coming back to Nairobi?
Anytime, immediately.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for taking the time. My question has to do with the economic recovery effort underway, particularly in the area of youth employment. We know that the informal sector, the Jua Kali, is quite large in Kenya and has constituted probably 90% of job creation. That's where people get their livelihoods. So how are you going to regenerate opportunity for the informal sector, and in particular for youth? And then lastly, what's giving you hope during this time? It's definitely a difficult time for so many leaders. So what's giving you hope?
Well, first and foremost, you're 100% correct. And I have always insisted this, that our Jua Kali sector, our informal sector, is the backbone of Kenya's economy. It is our small traders, it is our small business people, it is our hawkers on the street. They are the backbone of Kenya's economy. And undoubtedly, as a result of COVID, they are the ones who are most hurt, because their income is more or less daily based. It's not a salaried wage like those in the formal economy. They earn day to day, and this was one of the reasons why critical to our stimulus package was the introduction of what we are calling Kazi Mitaani, which is creating civil works, especially in our urban areas, where we could now engage. I lost you there. I don't know what has happened. Oh, can you hear me?
We still have you. Very glad.
Okay. I see you back again.
Thank you.
Where we could engage them in civil works in terms of cleaning their estates, doing up drainage. Furthermore, we also sharply increased our cash transfer to vulnerable families in order to ensure that especially this group of people was not ultimately left out. So this has been, and we are currently dispersing anywhere between $3 and $5 million a week to ensure that our informal sectors, at least, they may not be able to have their regular jobs, but at least are still able to stay afloat as we move towards reopening of our economy. In terms of opportunities, the key areas that we're targeting, especially amongst our youth, and that's why we've even gone through with our new education curriculum, which we are now calling competency-based curriculum, is to say that we are trying to arm them now with the skills to start looking at technology, to start looking, in fact, we have different programs where we are seeing how we can we're training up our young people to get online work, for example. We're training them up to see how they can get additional skills, because unfortunately our old curriculum was more or less based on, you learn your history, your French, your languages, and but no practical skills. So we have intensified sort of retraining under our technical schools, which we're expanding, in order to give our young people the practical skills that they may need to become self-employed, be it as plumbers, be it as builders, as carpenters, etc. Because these are the areas on top of the technology side that have opportunity. And this is what we're trying to arm them with. And we are very hopeful. Kenya is a young country. Africa is a young continent. Our future lies with these people. And that's why it becomes, to me, a great passion. Because at the end of the day, if we don't look after, and I keep telling this to all my colleagues, if we don't look after, if we don't plan for our young people, we are actually planning for disaster. So it is imperative.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to hand over to Ambassador Yard, but if I don't do this without asking a question that Gabriel Nagatu is demanding I ask, I'll be in huge trouble. So he wants to know, veteran of the African Development Bank, as of course you know, what are the chances for a revitalized East African community? And then I promise I will leave you alone.
I strongly believe in it. But I'll also be honest that we are also facing tremendous challenges for a variety of reasons. There is also mistrust and other such issues. And this is a part of my own belief that we need to be able to overcome some of these challenges. And the only way to actually overcome them is by bringing ourselves together. You know, the mistakes that occurred in the 70s and the 60s and that led to the dissolution of the old East African community, some of those suspicions still simmer. And I have been on the front line, always, of trying to say that we can't live in the past, but we can learn from our mistakes of the past. Let's be able to move forward. And that's why Negatu knows he was in Nairobi when, you know, under the auspices of the AU, we have all these different border commissions. We met up with the Prime Minister of Ethiopia in Moyale, where we started cross-border initiatives aimed at encouraging those communities that live on the border to be able to create. At that stage, we were actually calling Moyale the Dubai of Africa, trying to open up new transport corridors. We've done the same. We visited recently with President Museveni in Uganda, again, trying to bring those border communities together. How do they share resources that they see in common? Because these are the same people on the Ugandan side, on the Kenyan side. All these different efforts aimed at trying to remove suspicions, aimed at getting all of us to understand that we are stronger together than we are apart.
Thank you for that parting note. I'm handing over now to Ambassador Yard with very, very many thanks.
Thank you.
Excellency Kenyatta, Katrina Aubrey, thank you for that insightful discussion. I'm Ambassador Ramayad, and on behalf of the Africa Center and the Atlantic Council, I would also like to sincerely thank President Kenyatta for taking the time to speak with us and for choosing to return to the Atlantic Council's platform. As His Excellency and Mrs. Manson discussed, Kenya is faced by both a series of challenges and opportunities. As Africa and the world confront the pandemic, we will continue to look to leaders like President Kenyatta for their action and engagement. Yet the conversation reminds us that the same action, engagement, and willingness to cooperate will be just as important once the coronavirus subsides. It is a a testament to Kenya and to President Kenyatta that the country has continued to look past its borders and beyond the crisis during this period of uncertainty, moving forward on initiatives including the US-Kenya FTA and a campaign to represent Africa on the UN Security Council. As a Senegalese person and a French person, I have learned a lot. You have not only spoken as a Kenyan president, but also as a Pan-African leader. The Atlantic Council sincerely hopes this upcoming period will be one in which the United States strengthens its ties with Africa. And it is comforting to know that Kenya is one of the strategic partners that the United States is betting on in this endeavor. As for the audience, to wrap up this iteration for AC Front Page, I invite you to join the Atlantic Council next week for another episode featuring Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Margaret Vestager, on Tuesday, June 23 at 10 a.m. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.